Chairman, thank you. Chairman Powell, good to have you back here. Everybody's talking about inflation as we're sitting here today. It's raging in my home state of Montana. The 40-year high of 7.5% in January. Core inflation rose 6%. And we recognize it's both above estimates and both well above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. As we take a look at what's going on in Europe and Russia as it relates to energy prices, energy independence, national security, we're seeing it's all interconnected. As many countries in Europe continue to decommission nuclear power plants and stop investing in traditional energy, they've become now more dependent on adversaries like Russia for energy, and now we're seeing the cost of energy is skyrocketing. Sadly, I think this is a sneak peek at the path that America is headed down if President Biden and, frankly, our colleagues across the aisle continue to undermine made in America energy. In order to help lower energy costs, help our allies be less reliant on Putin and Russia, I believe we must unleash American energy and support truly the all-of-the-above American energy portfolio, which includes oil, natural gas, nuclear, hydro, and coal. I think it's more important now than ever before. Chairman Powell, the Fed demonstrated an unprecedented amount of speed to cut rates in March of 2020 when it first cut rates then by 50 basis points and followed that soon after by cutting rates to zero and launching a new round of quantitative easing. My question is this: has the Fed looked at what impact $125 a barrel oil might have on growth and inflation? Because I think we were just here about a year ago having conversations about inflation. Of course, we've moved away from any conversations about anything being transitory now, as we certainly have some inflation here that's far more than transitory. But I think it would be fair to say none of us at that moment would have thought we'd be seeing oil at $100 a barrel or more. My question is, have you looked at what $125 a barrel looks like, $150 a barrel, even $175 a barrel, what that might mean in terms of growth and inflation?
The answer is yes. We run simulations, and we're we're running those all the time right now. In addition, though, we have these rules of thumb that show what happens to gas prices, what happens to inflation, what happens to growth. They're crude rules of thumb, but they give us a way of thinking about what the effects would be, and they're what you would think. Inflation goes up, gas prices go up, and growth goes down a little bit.
So, what as you've done that modeling? What kind of impact are you going to see on inflation in your models if we got to, let's say, $125 or $150 a barrel?
Well, it would be compared to if you go back. Let's say that that's $50 above where oil was during the fourth quarter last year. I want to say it was in the $75, $80 range, something like that. So, for every $10, and the thing that matters more than anything is how long does it persist for? Mm-hmm. You can have an oil spike, mm-hmm. and if it just comes and goes, prices will go up, but it won't actually affect ongoing inflation. That's really the key thing. But I think I want to say $10 of oil, and I hope I don't get this wrong, is like 0.2, something like that of
inflation.
Yeah.
How about on economic growth? What's your sense?
It's more like 1/10. Okay. These are rules of thumb.
Yeah, and I think these numbers I've quoted here aren't outlandish. I mean, you've seen how quickly this is moving, how volatile the situation is, and it's, I'm glad you're modeling it, but we're very, very concerned, certainly, as you are, where this might go. I want to talk about the balance sheet, the Fed. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet's nearing $9 trillion, which is more than double where it was before the pandemic. Could you describe how unwinding the balance sheet as a tool to fight inflation compares to raising interest rates? For example, would a $500 billion reduction in the size of the balance sheet equate to a 50 basis point hike in interest rates?
It would be a very crude calculation because we do think the signaling value of QE is a big part of it, and you don't have that when you're having the balance sheet run up. But I don't have that one in my head. You're right, though. That's the sign is that it would be tightening policy. We really think of getting the balance sheet on running in the background and shrinking in a predictable way, and we think about the interest rates as the active tool.
Last question. Do you think we could be on the cusp of a wage price spiral, and what factors are you using to make the determination?
So this is obviously that's something we really don't want. It's part of what the big thing we don't want is to have inflation become entrenched and self-perpetuating. And it's a question of inflation psychology, really, and having what we call unanchored inflation expectations. And that's why we're moving ahead with our program to raise interest rates and get inflation under control. That is a serious concern and one that we monitor carefully. Again, it will depend on how wage increases have been very high, particularly at the low end. It'll depend on whether those are persistent or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Daines. Senator Van Hollen of Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Chairman.